the moment we have been waiting for. This particular topic around sex and psychedelics is something that is also incredibly important to me. Psychedelics didn't only transform my life, but they transformed my sex life. They got me out of my head and into my body. I was able to experience my own sensuality and sexuality and intimacy in a way that I never knew possible. I grew up having drinks and honestly having a buzz most of the time when I was sleeping with people completely disconnected from that experience. And as psychedelics came into my life, I got to see that I was missing out on a whole lot of pleasure and so much more that the sexual experience can offer. So it is my pleasure to now introduce our panelists. Ladies, come on up. Come on up. Give them a round of applause, please. Give them a round of applause. All right, take your seat, whichever one you like. By a show of hands, has anybody ever, if you feel comfortable answering this question, have you ever explored sex and psychedelics before in your own life? Okay, all right. So we kind of know, like, it's cool if you've done it properly. We'll talk about that. But let me introduce these incredible women that I have here with me today. I'm with Dr. Kat Meyer. She's a licensed psychotherapist specializing in sex, trauma, and psychedelics. She's also a ceremonialist, combo facilitator, author, teacher of yoga, and an international speaker dedicated to evolving the relationship we have surrounding sexuality and our bodies. As an expert and published researcher on the topic of sex, Dr. Kat sees clients in her private practice office in Beverly Hills and leads workshops, lectures, and retreats internationally. Kat, welcome.
Yay! I'm talking into my water. I don't think that's going to help. Yeah.
Next, we are with Mikaela de la Myco. She's a mother, an entheogen educator, a womb care practitioner, and acts as a community ceremony facilitator. She serves all people with ancestral healing ways and specializes in serving creatives, families, bleeding people, folks with birthing continuum, and people navigating natural birth control and pregnancy release. Her platform, Mama de la Myco, centers around the rematuration of entheogens, and she creates at the intersection of medicine woman, psychedelic mother, and sacred hoe. I couldn't wait. I saw that. I was like, oh my God, I can't wait to say this. Oh my God, yes. It's the only time I get to say it. I was like, I'm a sacred hoe. Hell yeah.
I don't know why that would be the only time that you.
I like literally. I'm gonna like start like low-key coining it all the time. But I'm gonna every time I'll say Mikaela first. I'll be like, I didn't make this up. But all right. Finally, but certainly not last but not least, Stephanie Karzon Abrams is a clinical pharmacologist by education, an entrepreneur, a community builder, and a researcher with an established and evolving interest in psychedelics, neurology, intensive care, cardiology, longevity science, women's health, and medicinal plants. She believes in pushing the boundaries of innovation in health and wellness, in leveraging the power of education and community, and in implementing the creative growth strategies to support access to psychedelics. Steph, welcome.
Hello.
I think we should start with our whys. I think it's a good place to begin about why we want to be here, why talking about this topic of sex and psychedelics is so important. So, why do you feel that the topic of sex and psychedelics is so important for us to talk about? Kat, why don't we start with you?
I will. Okay. So many of us have a challenging relationship with sex. You know, whether it has been the messages from our culture that don't do this, but do this, but be sensual, but don't be too sensual, or this is what it means to be masculine, or this is what it means to be feminine, but don't do this, because that's weird, right? And so we've grown up with these hard messages, and we've grown up with experiences that were distressing or traumatizing. And then we try to relate with another human, or we try to relate with our own bodies, and we can have a difficult time. whether it's functioning or whether it's even just having the desire for sex, or it's the ability to touch our own body in a way that's pleasurable, or it's learning how to sync up with another person. And so psychedelics really help us to both reveal some of these blocks that have inhibited us from being able to connect with our bodies, to be able to connect with pleasure, to even understand why we're having a difficult time maintaining an erection, or why we're having a difficult time even wanting sex. It can also help us to be able to redefine what sex is. And I know I'll be getting into that more, but we've been given this idea that sex is penetration, that it is a genital focus, that I have to get the other person off. And we can learn with psychedelics that sex can be so much more than that our bodies can be moving like dance and energetic experiences. We can feel the walls of ourselves dissolve so that we can really interconnect not only with the person in front of us, but with the world. And when we realize that sex doesn't have to be an activity or a behavior that we do, that sex is everywhere. These trees, so much of nature is created by eroticism, by sex, by, this reproduction. That we can be turned on by everything. That we can self-source our own arousal. That we don't have to keep outsourcing it to some hot dude or some hot chick, And I'll be giving you some practices to be able to do that. Yay, fun! But we can also help to step away from this construct that is actually pretty broken and contributes to these dysfunctions. We don't have to have an erect penis to have the most insane type of sex. We don't have to chase an orgasm to melt into pleasure and how it moves us, really allowing pleasure to be our compass instead. And that is some of the most satisfying sex that I've ever had. And so psychedelics remind us of that, and they can help to move those blocks to help us get there.
Beautifully said. Mikaela, what about you?
Shay, I feel like she pretty much, it's a wrap after that. But what really resonated with me about your share was that we live in a sensual world. And I come from a framework of constantly questioning my beliefs and where they come from. Who taught me that sex needed to be these things or have such rigidity, or that genders need to express themselves in these really limited ways. And I've found a lot of liberation by decolonizing my life ways and indigenizing my life ways. And I claim deeply that everyone in this room has ancestors that experienced extreme pleasure in their lives. And that pleasure was almost a scary thing to dominating powers. To separate a person and a people from their pleasure is definitely a form of control. So within psychedelics, I just feel, as I was beginning my journey 9 years ago, as a young person in college, liberation at every cellular level, mental, emotional, through dance, through singing, through wild orgasmic experience, that I was healing my ancestral line of them maybe being removed from that process, and my descendants now being able to experience pleasure, our descendants and the descendants of everyone on this planet deserves pleasure in the deepest way. And I definitely proclaim that pleasure is our birthright, and sex and experience of the sensuality of nature is how the greatest peoples of the planet experienced their human lives, and created with the beauty and the aesthetics of nature as models and guides. So I just want to remember and help us all remember that we are human animals. that we're very human animals. And with mushrooms in particular, I feel more animal, I feel feral, I feel divine and meat and flesh and bone. So why I'm here and why is it so important? Because pleasure is a liberatory process, and we are so deserving of it in every way. And non-sexual pleasure, sensory pleasure, softness. I speak in a lot of spaces where it's mostly BIPOC and Black people and people of color, and I just see my brothers and sisters living in such tough environments that like softness is not always available to them, hardly ever in this world. And so I really love to invite just greater softness, ease, and joy. I remember when I was in Detroit at the Detroit Psychedelic Conference, and they have a Women in Entheogens conference, and I just impromptu brought some MDMA with me, and there's like maybe 15 people there, and of those 15 people, like 6 of them had never tried MDMA before, and so I made this beautiful batch of tea, and I held the space for them, and I watched Black men like with their eyes closed just smile just like this and be really slow and really soft and touch Black women and be really slow and really soft and breathe together, and just holding space for a group of people in that way. There's no monetary exchange. It's just how we show love to each other is what I really miss about psychedelics, is just holding space for each other so that we can feel good and soft and liberated. So that's why I'm standing here right now, because I've just borne witness to the incredible process that people have when they just touch indigenous, ancestral pleasure and softness and the impact it can make in their lives. Thank you.
Beautiful, beautiful. Steph?
Sex is so intricately woven into the human experience, yet in this society that we live in, we have created barriers where it's shameful to ask questions, or it's shameful sometimes to share about difficulties, traumatic experiences that we might have felt and dealt with in our lives. How can something that allowed for all of us to be here, to procreate, to feel, to enjoy, be so stigmatized? So growing the conversation in a space like this one that's safe, that's trusting, that's responsible is so important, because yes, we are all entitled to that liberation, to the pleasure, like you mentioned. Nature is beautiful, nature is sensual, but many of us might not have that relationship with sex. Many people have experienced trauma in their lives. Many people may have different health issues that now they cannot experience that pleasure. There are obstacles. And if that information is not readily available, if they don't feel like there's a safe place to go and ask those questions, what now? How do we feel that pleasure again? How do we feel that liberation once more? And I'd love to give an example, because I worked many years in the ICU and I saw many patients with head injury. And what a lot of people don't talk about is there's a whole hormonal derailment after a head injury. And so many patients, a year or two out, are coming with these questions of, how do I heal this part of my trauma? And many specialists don't know, because it's just not an area that people are invested or interested in, that people are not funding. And I found more and more that plant medicines, medicinal herbs, and psychedelics are accompanying people on a journey where they are able to heal these imbalances, these issues, and find that sexual liberation, that enjoyment again. And this goes beyond just mood and sleep and stress. This is fertility, this is libido, this is sustaining an erection, achieving orgasm, things that maybe for some of you are easy, everyday once a week, whatever it is. And for some people, it's years where they just think that it'll never happen again. So all in all, I'm trying to say that being here today, I applaud everyone who is here. I applaud those who put this together because these are important topics, and we need to continue growing this conversation.
Man, listening to the three of you, I just thought, this is a fucking good panel. Like, damn, ladies, really, like.
It could be a whole conference.
I mean,
days.
all three of you, I was like, wow. All right, so Steph, staying with you now. How can psychedelics enhance our sex lives? And how does it differ from something like alcohol? I think a lot of us know sex and alcohol, right? That's the way that we get comfortable being with the opposite sex, especially if you're new to them. But what about the psychedelic experience is the liberation you ladies are talking about?
I think intention behind everything is so important. So ask yourself the question, why are you drinking? What are you trying to achieve? Is it high vibe? Are you present with yourself and the people around you? Are you engaged? Or are you trying to hide behind a veil, a wall, and dissociate yourself from who you really are so that you feel more comfortable in a social setting or you feel more comfortable handling a stressful situation? And engaging in alcohol in that way is doing ourselves an extreme disservice because we're not allowing ourselves to feel. It's not comfort and ease. The social lubricant is a mirage. It's a total mirage. If you're not feeling why you're anxious in the first place, then how are you ever going to surmount that? So I implore us all to turn the mirror on ourselves and try to understand, how do I really achieve self-acceptance? How do I show up as my authentic self? And how do I embrace others as themselves as well? And I think where psychedelics come in is that if you've ever experienced a psychedelic that's an empathogen, that's heart-opening, like MDMA, for example, you felt this light and this happiness and this love emerge from a shadow. And you felt what it's like to trust yourself and to break patterns that are no longer serving you, and you feel confident showing up as your authentic self. And not only that, but when you see someone who's different from you, you're not going to have the insecure reaction to close your heart to them. You will embrace them for who they are, and you'll continue to cultivate a group of people who resonate with you on that level, who embody that energy and that philosophy. And the more you cultivate people like that in your circle, the more powerful it is. You're amplifying all of it. And I think that once you've experienced a heart-opening psychedelic, you then learn that that power, that ability lives inside of you and that you can replicate it throughout your entire life. Get high on your own supply, right? And so I think that psychedelics can be an amazing ally in this context. And for sex, I mean, using sex in the context of, using alcohol in the context of sex, again, can be used as this veil to disassociate, to feel more comfortable. But if you're not comfortable in the first place, then maybe you shouldn't be there in the first place, right? And being able to accept that truth is a huge step. And using psychedelics, like Kat was mentioning in sex, is not just about the pleasure, the orgasm, getting her off, getting him off. By going deep with a partner, by building trust, by engaging in other activities that deepen that relationship, you can ultimately find more pleasure because you've reached this higher realm. So I love champagne. I will always love champagne. Right? And
Tequila's a plant medicine.
there you go. It's of the earth. But why are you consuming? What is your intention? Right? I'm not saying stop all the drinking, psychedelics for everyone. Yes, psychedelics for everyone. But what is your intention when you are engaging in alcohol? Turn that mirror onto yourself.
Really well said. Yeah. Kat, did you want to add to that?
Sure do. Yes, I do.
Well, excellent.
Okay. So God, first of all, that was beautifully said. So beautifully said. And I believe that, again, psychedelics can give us these reference points that help us to now know where we may be going. I think that sex in and of itself is very psychedelic. The deeper we get into presence with what comes up in sex, you will notice the parts of you that are afraid, or the parts of you that shut down, or the parts of us that dissociate a little bit, or the parts of us that start doing the to-do list or the grocery list when we're, in bed with somebody. Never happened to me before. and yet many of us don't know, we've never had that experience, so we don't know what we're looking for in order to get there. And so to speak to what Stephanie was saying, we can have the experience of deeper connection, or with MDMA, we fall into this experience of sex as intimate and connective. So speaking to these reference points. So since September, I've been collecting anecdotal data from individuals around sex and psychedelics, because there aren't that much academic research on psychedelics. And then you add sex in there, and there's even less. So I've been working to collect people's experiences and see what sort of themes that we're seeing from that. I have over 700 responses at this point, and I have been seeing themes of the moving away from performance, or psychedelics teaching them to step away from the performance aspect of it and to drop into more of the pleasure aspect of it, that they feel a deeper connection both in their own bodies and then also with their partners, a connection with self-compassion as well as compassion for their partner, and that's really important. I want to touch on that. But then also how sex can be an energetic experience. So it's not just about the bodies, but it can be this movement of subtle energy that turns into greater amounts of energy. And a lot of that we can also see this ability to both stimulate the nervous system while also being able to relax the body so that energy can flow. This whether we want to call it energy, life force energy, nervous system energy, all of that being able to help us to dissolve into sex more effectively. So the interesting part around the self-compassion, again, there's so much shame around sex that inhibits us from being in our authentic expression, like Stephanie said so well. And for us to be able to look at any of that requires a level of being able to hold ourselves and to look with curiosity and self-compassion. And so to transform some of these shames for more authentic, expressive selves, that's a key piece. Now, self-compassion and self-love are oftentimes these really big concepts that fit really nicely on memes that we follow on Instagram. But to actually experience it may be hard for many of us. There's so many steps in order to experience that. I remember the very first ayahuasca ceremony I had ever done. I went into the bathroom and I looked in the mirror, and I just got caught up in the absolute adorableness of myself.
You are cute.
Thank you. My hands were cupping my baby cheeks, and I was looking deep into my eyes, and I was like, oh my God, I'm so cute. And now, mind you, I had been a therapist at this point for a few years, and I was teaching people about self-love. But this was the first time that I fully embodied or fully understood the embodiment of what that actually meant. Because before, it was an intellectual concept. You do the affirmations and you say, I love myself, and you're so pretty, right? You look in the mirror. And that's an important practice. But this was like, oh, now I know what I'm looking for. Now I know what I'm actually teaching people to do. Oh, this is hard shit. But it gave me a reference point that now I could do the practices and know where I was going with that. Like, what was I trying to get back to? And that integration piece is really important. You know, take a psychedelics in sex and have a great time in sex. But if you take that experience and then you contemplate that and you integrate your sex with MDMA or LSD, you can learn a lot from that experience to now make your everyday sex life so much more magnetic and powerful. I don't know, how many of you, and maybe the two of you, I grew up with or maybe not grew up, but maybe in my 20s, that if you had sex on MDMA, it would ruin your sex life. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember people saying that.
Yeah, that sex is never going to be the same again.
Yeah, that's not true.
Or that it'd be the best sex.
Yeah, and then regular sex
doesn't
wouldn't
even
be
happen.
good again.
Yeah,
You're like, oh, well, I can't do it because I have to always be on MDMA.
Yeah. But the way that we can transform that to make all your sex life amazing is to take what you learn there and then implement that. Because it doesn't just have to happen in that one experience. It can happen throughout. In Tantra, we have this experience called transfiguration. And it's when we transform something into the divine, whether it's the other person or it's ourselves. And that's how sex, imagine making love to divine. Like, oh, it's going to be good. And you see yourself as divine, I'm going to show up as a sex god, So it's going to transform the way you touch them, the way you allow touch to reach you, too. In psychedelics, it can help us to connect with that sex god feeling. It can help us to connect with that, again, self-compassion, that self-love feeling. And it can transform, how we show up. Now you're a sex god for life. Yeah.
Kat, I want to talk to you a little bit you talked about MDMA, you talked about LSD. Now, just because MDMA on a sexual experience can be a really intimate, beautiful time, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the most, the best for performance necessarily. And I think the thing that I think everybody kind of wants to know is like, what are some of the best psychedelics that you've seen anecdotally, that you've heard, for arousal and intimacy? And then what's actually good for the actual act of sex? Which ones are seem to work a little better in those frameworks?
Yeah. And of course, the two of you jump in here because I know you got some stories too. And I think it comes back to, again, redefining what sex is. So if stimulants, things like MDMA, help you to connect with the intimate aspect, the pleasure aspect. So for clients who have never who have a difficult time with being in their body, or due to trauma, they have a difficult time with pleasure, being able to relax in their body in order to feel pleasure. They've shared with me that MDMA and psilocybin were both really helpful for them to be able to connect with pleasure again. However, any of these stimulants is also going to impact your ability to have ejaculation. So we're talking again about the definition of sex being more penetration focused, more genital focused, and you might have a difficult time with keeping it up. You might have a difficult time with having an ejaculation or having genital orgasms. And that's because a stimulant has an impact on your parasympathetic system, and your parasympathetic system is necessary for that orgasm or for that ejaculation. So just keep that in mind. Readjust your idea of what it is that might happen in that experience. Again, sex can be so much more than just that. Ketamine is a beautiful one. It's what I work with clinically in the office, and as it relates to sex, it lifts the heaviness of depression. It lifts the anxiety. At lower doses, it can be a powerful way for us to be able to be in the body without some of the chronic pain or the depression or the anxiety that weighs us down and impacts. Higher doses wouldn't suggest it. You might shoot off into another stratosphere and you don't even know where your partner is. You don't know where your dick is. You don't know, like, you just don't know. So, it just... just keeping that in mind too with ketamine, it's a dose. It's just dose dependent. Ketamine's a beautiful one for having different experiences depending on your dose. But I see them as more ethereal aspects of sexuality. It lifts that body. It is a dissociator, but I also believe it dissociates us from the actual dissociation, so we can be with the body and the pleasure more effectively. I've experienced I've been studying Tantra for about 14 years, and I see some of the same states that I've reached in Tantra in these experiences of psychedelics, especially mushrooms, and mushrooms with MDMA. Beautiful. LSD. I think Annie Sprinkle wrote this really incredible, groundbreaking article years ago, and Annie Sprinkle is a sex educator and sex worker, and she shared about her experiences with psychedelics and sex, especially with LSD. And for her, it was monumental, helped her to open the body and experience sex as this transcendent, energetic experience. And I would agree, if there isn't too much psychological matter getting in the way. Because with any of these substances, you have, it's a balance, right, of being able to be in the body and be with the energy of it, and all the shit that we've been shoving in the background of our mind now coming forward, being like, you gotta look at this now and deal with this now, right? That's not super sexy. So I do hear from people that they say, mushrooms don't make them sexy. They just want to stay introverted in their head and work on things. I get it. And with some practices that I'm going to share with you later, we actually can bring it out of the head and into the body. Just again, as long as you can find your body.
Well said. Mikaela, Steph, any favorites before we move on to another question?
So yeah, putting the plant back in plant medicine, I think, is really interesting and important. There's a bit of an interesting separation between like the hierarchy of like cool natural substances. There's like entheogens at the top and things that will like trip you out at the top, and then like the humble chamomile at the bottom. Shout out to my herbalism baddies for understanding what that meant. But, I come from a tradition of womb care that centers practices that care directly for the womb with the assistance of plants. And what I've learned in like my time within the herbalism space is that plants inherently have a godlike quality to them, each and every one of them, from the rose to the lavender to the holy basil and other incredible adaptogens and nervine plants that can invite a lot of support, just like the other entheogens can. And so I've had incredible experiences with this particular technique of bringing plants into the body called yoni steaming. Raise your hand if you've ever heard about a yoni steam before. Okay, like that's more than most crowds. That's awesome. So I'm really grateful. It's Santa Barbara, right? But I'm really grateful to hear that more people are learning about this practice, because it's like one of the only times we ever really get penetrated by plants and have like intimate experiences with plants. And I have some dear friends and teachers that have studied like ancestral European herbalism ways and have like focused a lot of their study in the flying ointments. Has anyone heard about what a flying ointment is? Cool. So some of my witches in the house. So the witches on broomsticks kind of motif as a symbol in our culture is based in a real practice of like cooking down entheogenic plants or plants of any kind and suspending them in a fat or an oil and making a lubricant by which they adorn their sticks and broomstick corners and bedposts and put them between their legs. So they dress like these phallic symbols, shape figures in their home, and rub it inside of their body. So they're being penetrated by entheogenic plants and then receiving powerful experiences by ingesting them through their, mucous membranes, which is really fascinating and super cool. Like, can you boof mushrooms? Like, I guess you can in this case if they're suspended in a fat. So I've had incredible experiences with yoni steaming specific plants that are really aphrodisic. Roses, lavender, holy basil, lemon balm. I have a lemon balm tincture upstairs, motherwort, and the steam brings volatile oils into the thin membranes of your reproductive system. And in a kind of like soft ritual type of way, candles on, this is for the ladies, but anyone can steam. But I've felt so like turned on by plants in this very direct way. It's guided me to some of my most like pleasurable, energetic, spiritual, sensual experiences. If we are here to redefine what sex is, like self-pleasure and sex with self is really meaningful and can be very transformative when combined with special plants like the nervines or in tandem with a microdose of mushroom or a little bit of cannabis. I mean, shout out to the Terpene Lounge, but I've had a lot of loving experiences with Santa Maria, with cannabis and sensual and sexual experiences. So just wanted to bring to, the conversation, like the humble plant kingdom and like all of the, the wonderful technology that is. And of course, like self-pleasure as part of a sex and psychedelic experience too. Thank you.
When you were talking about cannabis and sex, I just remember like I used to smoke a lot and I would smoke too much, talking about dose, and I would literally be having sex and I would be like, what am I doing? Like I would be completely gone, be like, I'm feeling complete ecstasy, but having no idea what's going on. Anyway, dose, guys, okay? That's just a story about dosage. Steph, we have time for 2 more questions. So Steph, I want to talk to you a little bit about hormones and psychedelics, things like PMS, postpartum, cortisol. What can you tell us that you're seeing about how psychedelics can actually affect our hormonal system? Because as we know, without that imbalance, again, that's going to affect our sexual function.
So for the ladies, we're at a little bit of an advantage because we have lots of estrogen. And estrogen has the power to enhance not just the sexual experience, but the psychedelic experience. When there's a rise in estrogen during a part of our menstrual cycle, there are more receptors readily available, more binding sites for serotonin, which amplifies the effect of a serotonin-forward psychedelic, like your classical psychedelics, MDMA, LSD, psilocybin, etc. So what we're finding is that depending on where women are in their cycles, there could be a more powerful psychedelic experience. And this also plays in not just for journeys, but for microdosing as well. Microdosers in the crowd, yeah. So this is something that's really interesting that we should pay attention to, because not only does the dose of our microdose kind of change depending on how long we've been on a protocol, but have you maybe ever noticed that one day you'll take the same dose that you did 2 days ago and you're seeing maybe not super clearly, or you're feeling a little wonky, and that's very hormonally dependent. It's dependent on your state of mind as well, your mood, maybe what you ate, but definitely for women, estrogen is playing a role. And for PMS, it's not fun. Obviously, our hormones tend to change throughout life, whether it's motivated by an event like pregnancy or menopause, but also sometimes things change on a dime. I remember I was coasting, and then all of a sudden it was PMS, it was headaches, it was a cyclical acne, and I don't really know what shifted, and I didn't want to go on some crazy birth control pill that was going to spike my estrogen and cause a bunch of other symptoms. And so I sought out a functional medicine specialist, and she put me on a blend of herbs. So going back to the plant, 100% going back to earth. And I was so skeptical. I was like, this is not going to work. But it did. And I have to tip my hat to ginseng, to poria, which is a wood-eating fungus, to ginkgo biloba, to licorice root, to mint, to ginger. All of these diuretics, anti-inflammatories, they really did help. And so I really did start to investigate a little bit more about all of these kinds of herbs and these relationships with females and hormones. And something that I wanted to mention as well is in office and clinic right now, in practice, we're using ketamine. And ketamine actually can increase estrogen levels. And it also increases our glutamate levels, which gives us an antidepressant effect. And so there are women that are seeking a little bit of support in ketamine therapy to manage the symptoms of PMS or PMDD, which is a more severe disorder, but similar to PMS. Remind me what else you asked me?
I mean, you, like just.
I feel like I can keep going,
yeah,
but
yeah,
there
no,
was
I mean
something
that's
else?
perfect. I mean,
Is it cortisol levels? Oh, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So not a lot about men's hormones and psychedelics. Most of the data that we're seeing shows that, psychedelics can negatively impact, libido for men or make it difficult to achieve orgasm or sustain an erection. But cortisol is a hormone that ties well into sex and mood and our well-being and our desire. And so that's our stress hormone. And so this is for men and women, but we want to be able to manage those levels, and on a day-to-day, we live such fast-paced lives, like not surprised if our cortisol levels are going up and down. If we're coffee drinkers, that's also something that will affect our cortisol levels. So, I think it's important to have a good idea of, what is happening in our bodies and to seek answers that maybe aren't rooted in traditional medicine, because here in the Western Hemisphere, we call them alternatives, but in the rest of the world, they're not, There are mushrooms and plants that are used in mainstream treatments for all sorts of afflictions, and here they've been kind of cast aside and seen as alternatives or just things that may not really have as much power. But, shout out to the ergot mushroom.
Yes. So, our final question, I think we have to end with a juicy one, right? Like, I think we got to go there, Kat. Can you give us some tools, some practices, some things that we should maybe take into the bedroom at some point?
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Wow. Okay. When we're going into a psychedelic experience, really, ultimately, you can take this into the bedroom without a psychedelic as well, but we hold all of the tools that we need to make something an erotic experience inside of ourselves already. So what Stephanie had said earlier, using intention, first of all, I have the intention of going into this experience as an erotic experience to touch into my eroticism, into my pleasure, whatever it is that you're exploring, to help to anchor you of where you're going. Then, using the tools of your breath, the sound that you make, the movement of your body, the visualization, and the touch that you have is what will transform this experience from being a heady cerebral experience and bring it into your body for an erotic experience. Our breath will transform your physiological state. By slowing down your breath versus quickening your breath, you can have two different experiences. By breathing in and out of your nose versus breathing in and out of your mouth, you will have two different experiences. You can try it right now. Sound. Sound vibration helps to break up stagnancy in our body, but it also stimulates the vagus nerve, which is associated with the parasympathetic aspect of our nervous system. And it branches all the way down into our gut and can stimulate the genitals. So for us who have wombs, the cervix, and for men, the nice genitals. that can help with orgasm. Different types of texture of sound, different pitches. You can move sound by having a lower sound, like a guttural sound, to work in more of your gut. And then you can move the pitch up through your body and feel how that impacts your body. So higher pitches versus lower pitches, texture, the texture being more of the attitude of the sound. So like clicks or hums or moans versus purring versus, I love the sound of Z, like zzz or shh. And noticing how these different textures will impact the way that you feel in your body. Movement. I see some of the best forms of movement being circles to both activate, and then spirals to what we call sublimate, or move the energy, draw the energy up. So circulating into the hips and then really allowing the whole spine to fall into a spiral, or undulating the spine, meaning allow it to move forward and back like a snake. You know, these are, like what Mikaela said, primal movements. Drops us into this animal, this human animal, you called it, right? Yeah, I love that.
They're instinctive.
Yeah, yeah. So it's really just inviting what is so natural and allowing that to spiral for us. Visualization, visualizing. I like to visualize. I had another vision just popped up in my head. I'll share it with you in a moment. But visualizing a ball of white light in your genitals, or pulsations. Visualizing pulsations happening and allowing your body to fall into rhythm with that. And where your attention flows, your energy can go. We can open ourselves up. Attention in your genitals locally can bring you there into that experience. Then you can also expand your attention globally and bring your experience into your entire body as it relates with this. The image that I'll tell you, it was it was a juicy apple that was dripped in honey, and the honey just running off of the apple onto, I don't know where it was going, but, even just like honey, the thought of honey always turns me on because it's thick and it just runs and it's drippy. And I don't know how many of you turned on right now? Over in the back. And I love visualizing this honey pot, like my honey pot, and I'm stirring it and I'm stirring the energy down there. And then I'm allowing, I'm like moving like honey, which allows me to drop into this space that's slower, like Mikaela was saying, this slowness, sensualness. And then also touch, where we touch our body also helps to open the sensory receptors so that we can feel in those areas. So many women that I work with who I ask them about their breasts, the relationship with their breasts, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that's not sensitive. I don't go there," or I freak out when my partner touches my nipples, and I don't like that. Well, if we start, and many of us, that's because we have grown up with negative messages around our breasts, or we've had unwanted attention, or, and we just don't touch them anymore. We touch them to put on a shirt, and that's it. But that desensitizes our experience, and we're no longer present to it. Our breasts have the ability to be orgasmic, but only when we take the time to touch them. And touch them with presence, and touch them with affection and tenderness and sensuality. And it can, your whole body can turn alive. So those tools where I started with intention, breath, sound, movement, visualization, and touch.
Thank you so much. Can you please give these ladies a round of applause? Thank you, thank you, thank you. We are out of time right now, but I encourage everyone to come up and speak to them. They're going to be here. If you have specific questions that you want to come up and talk to them, please feel free. Thank you both, all three of you.
Yeah.
Oh, and we'll share how you can find us. So you can find me at sexloveyoga.com. You can also follow me on Instagram for hilarious content and great memes on Fridays at sexloveyoga.
Thank you. Mikaela?
I will be physically upstairs. I have a lot of my creations and really beautiful indigenous beadwork with mushroom. That's very hard to find right up there in the bird's nest. And yeah, come drop in, talk to me. Let's connect with plants. I have all kinds of wonderful medicines there, like herbal contraception medicines and things like that. So would love to talk to the conscious contraception curious. And my work is centered in what's called mush womb consciousness, where being a cyclical body interacts with entheogenic life, and that touches motherhood, being a sacred hoe, as we mentioned before, and yeah, being a medicine woman as well, and that's an important part of my life. So you can find me online if you look up mush womb, WOMB, mush womb. You'll find all my shit. So find me there. Thank you so much for your attention and your time.
Steph?
You can find me at beyondthebench.life, and that's just where you'll be able to find all the different things I'm working on, from research to music to community building. But I'd love to talk with you tonight, so feel free to come find me and continue the conversation.
And if you are interested in more psychedelic content, check out Trip on This podcast. It's on all of your podcast platforms. It's on YouTube. That's where I interview thought leaders and just interesting characters on the psychedelic journey. It's a lot of fun. I'm also at Life with Kat Walsh on all socials, and I also post some sometimes ridiculous videos. So, ladies, thank you all so much. District216, thank you so much for hosting us. Let's get this party started now, all right? Is everyone hungry? Okay, food's coming up.
Should be doing what I done for you. Should be doing what I done